So today we have two special guests who are multifaceted, who have multiple careers. Let me welcome Kunal Kapoor, who's the co-founder of Ketto. He's a well-known actor, trained with Barry John, worked with Naseeruddin Shah, and I can go on. So welcome, Kunal. Thank you for talking to Business World.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
You can call me AV or Anurag or Dr. Batra, whatever. But let me tell you, I am the Dr. Batra who makes people's hair go away. There's another one who fixes them and we share the fees. But on a serious note, let me bring in Lieutenant General S.M. Mehta, who's a very decorated forces leader. But now he's the CEO of Hans Foundation. And Hans Foundation has been doing fantastic work wherever is needed. Been doing great work in COVID to help people who are needy. So welcome Lieutenant General S.M. Mehta to this BW Dialogue.
Thank you so much.
So first of all, let me start with Kunal. Kunal, how have been the last 150 odd days for you? What has kept you personally and professionally busy?
Well, I think it's been a time of mixed emotions, honestly. There's obviously the good, which is that you've had a chance to spend time with the family, which you don't get otherwise. I've had a chance to catch up on everything that I wanted to read, the books I wanted to read, watch the content I wanted to watch, learn how to play the guitar, doing a course on artificial intelligence. Obviously, lots of work at Ketto. We've all shifted to working from home, but it's been very hectic the last 5 months for Ketto because a lot of people have started campaigns, lots of people wanting to support campaigns, fundraisers. So that's been happening, which is all very good. But I think the flip side of it is, of course, there's a sense of anxiety and uncertainty, which is at the back of all our heads. When will this end? How will this end? What will the world look like when this is over and done with? So I think it's a mix of two things. One is, of course, the good, and of course, the anxiety that goes with it as well.
Lieutenant General Mehta, I would ask you the same thing. How have been the last 120 days, personally and professionally for you?
Okay, since you asked it in two forms, personally, I'll touch upon personally first. Like Kunal said, first, the anxiety and uncertainty, that hit you very hard. And the first thing which came to the mind, like my two daughters, they stay abroad. One is in US and one is in UK. And they were going through a very bad time. That time, UK and US, COVID had hit very hard. So there was an anxiety about the children. There was anxiety about your near and dear ones. And gradually, I even offered my daughter in UK to, catch a plane and come next day before the lockdown happens. But you know how children are. So they didn't listen to me. They are independent women, strong women. And they said that, sorry, Papa, that may be your parental thing, but we are not going to come to India and we are going to face it what it is here. So they are continuing. That was one very big anxiety as a parent. And the second one was that we were going through an audit and my team was regularly going to the office up to 22nd, and some of them used to commute by public transport, and safety of my team was primemost. And we did go to the authorities and told them to stop the audit. Finally they did, but there was a big anxiety. And one of our team members, she was diagnosed with COVID positive. She was pregnant, but luckily nothing happened and she has had a normal delivery. So that was another worry. The third thing was the house. I'm a military man, and you know that we have help all through our career, and the society I live in, there was total lockdown, in the sense they declared our area red zone because there were few COVID cases in our society. There was no domestic help available. I had never entered the kitchen. I learned a few tricks from my wife, and you can call me a glorified ayah. I had to do what I didn't do all my life. You had to clean the house, dust the house, and you had to, be part of the house. And that was a great learning. I never realized that house is so difficult. So to manage the house is so difficult and it is so tough. But by and by you learned, and 3 months, it was totally no help at all. Our gates were closed, it was a red zone. Professionally, we hit totally a roadblock. We have something like 150 projects, 150 partners all over the country. Everything came to a grinding halt. Our construction projects, they came to a grinding halt. And then those moving images on the TV, migrant workers walking home, and then you had a responsibility being a foundation. We quickly stepped in. We rebooted, reorganized, and we went on our job first to tackle and help the people in this very difficult and crisis situation. So this is what we did, and then gradually, since we are totally online, our work is totally online. So we were working from home, and it was difficult to manage the team, though it's not a very big team, but then you have to keep them busy, keep the morale high. So these were difficult times, but gradually it settled down, and I realized that the time I was wasting in travel, about 3 hours every day, meeting people in the office and spending a lot of time, that got added. Of course, I was spending most of the time, some time for my being a domestic help also, but it increased the efficiency by and by, and I find that I could do more work from home than what I was doing in the office. So these were the takeoffs of the these 120 days, still continuing. Like he said, one is anxious, when is it going to end? We're still working from home, everyone wants to come to the office, but there is no way out.
And tell us, you've been an army man.
Yes.
So you're a decorated officer. You've seen wars, right? Now, so you're not new to crisis. What was different about this crisis from any other crisis that you may have seen in your life?
See, it was. First of all, I was very surprised when we saw those images of thousands of workers, on the border trying to reach their states, and the kind of, organization which was required on ground was not there. And right across, I was watching, this Ghaziabad and Uttar Pradesh, and the army was sitting next door, and they could have come in and they could have organized this much better. Anyway, but that's part of the decision of the administration. But in this case, what we found was that there was a total lockdown. We were asked to set up an isolation camp in Udham Singh Nagar in Uttarakhand, where there were 10,000 migrant laborers, and they were lying on the floor. There were mosquitoes, it was very warm, very hot over there. Children, women, men, and the government approached us and they said, we want to set up this thing. Can you provide us 5,000 cots and 5,000, mattresses, pillows, bed covers, mosquito nets, and pedestal fans? How do we get them? Everything is under a lockdown. So it was those organizational skills of the army. We were able to approach Panipat, we got the bed sheets, we got the mattresses. It is one of the biggest isolation camps. Within 7 days, we were able to manage. And thanks to my team, which worked day in and day out, I was only pushing them, I was only inspiring them. But we were able to achieve this. We were able to reach out to almost about 10 lakh people. What we did was, like in the remote villages of Uttarakhand or Rajasthan or elsewhere, we have our partners all over the country. We tied up with the local baniya, that परचून की जो शॉप होती है, उससे हमने टाई अप किया, उसका बैंक अकाउंट लिया, and we put the money in his bank, and we made sure that everybody in the village, because PDS system had broken down initially, it picked up later on. In this public distribution system, the rations were not reaching. People didn't have money to buy rations from the ration shops, so we gave money. In Uttarakhand alone, we reached out to 150,000 people and provided rations. The police approached us, the government approached us. There were migrant workers who were stuck in Dehradun. We provided about you can say about 2,000 plus 3,000, 5,000 people we provided rations. First lot was that when the government approached us. And then the Manipuris, they were stuck in NCR and Delhi. There was a commissioner who approached us, and that was organized very well. They didn't have money, they didn't have food. So like that, we had to, innovate ways how to, make good of this opportunity and how to find ways and means to reach out to people. And a lot of things like we provided ventilators to 4 states because the frontline warriors like the doctors, PP kits, all that, had to be organized, and that had to be done in real time. So that's where the skills of the army came handy. And of course, I always say it is the team which matters, and my team is very efficient, one of the best in the world.
Thank you, General Mehta, for sharing what the Hans Foundation and you did for looking after the migrant laborers. And crises like us, these remind us that there is so much inequality, and we need to do much more for a certain bottom of the pyramid that exists in India. Coming back to you, Kunal, tell us, how did you get associated with Ketto? Tell us the story. I know your co-founder, Varun also, I'm aware, but for the viewers and our readers, tell us, how did you become a co-founder of Ketto? How has been the journey? Take us through the journey.
Well, so we started about 8 years back, and I was working with a number of NGOs in the social space, and I found that there were a lot of challenges that the NGOs were facing. First and foremost was the challenge of course, raising money. Once you had reached out to your donors, it was very difficult to reach out to them over and over again. Secondly was the transparency and the ease that somebody who wanted to donate didn't have. We felt like the social space needed to be something that was far more transparent, and we needed to make it much easier for people to donate when they wanted to donate. And thirdly was how do you get NGOs to reach out to new donors? You've reached out to your donors, you've asked them for money, they've given you the money, but then how do you now reach out to new people and tell them the work that you're doing? So these were the challenges that I found that these NGOs were facing. And at the same time, I happened to meet Varun Sheth, who had worked in the social space as well. And we both had similar ideas. We both felt like there were similar challenges that we needed to get together to overcome. And the idea was to build a bridge using technology, because technology was something that we spend so much time on our phones, our computers. We wanted to use technology to build a bridge between people that can help and people that need helping. Because very often I came across people around me as well who wanted to help, but they didn't know how to go about it. So we wanted to make it so simple that you could get onto your smartphone and in 2 minutes, you could help anybody anywhere in the country for any cause of your choosing. So the idea was to use technology to build this bridge. But what we assumed, which a lot of people told us at that point was wrong, was that people in India are generous. When we started off, lots of people said, no, Indians don't give. They're not generous. But my thinking, Varun's thinking was different. We believed that they were generous, but they just didn't have the avenue to give. So we felt like if we could reach out to younger people, people that wanted to make a difference but didn't know how to make a difference, it could become something
and
that
people who are passionate about certain causes. See,
correct.
If you want to make a difference, you want to make an impact, possibly you care about a lot of things, but some things you care more. So you
Correct.
want to make a difference in that specific zone. So
Absolutely.
that alignment is important.
I come across a lot of friends, people around me that used to tell me that, look, I want to make a difference. There's a flood that's happened in Assam. I want to make a difference, but I don't know how. Who do I give to? How do I go about giving? Can I trust this NGO or not? Can I trust this individual or not? So I felt like, that was a challenge that needed to be overcome if we were going to really get people involved, in the social space. And the other thing that I found was that the whole social space in our country was viewed as something that was only for a particular sort of people. You had to be, had to have a certain gravity to you. You had to be, serious to get involved in the social space. Whereas when I looked out west at the ecosystem, it was very different. There were lots of actors, sports people involved. People were having garage sales, baking cakes. So the issue was serious that we were dealing with, but the way they went about raising funds for the issue was completely different. It was a lot of fun, and I felt like that was a ecosystem that we needed to get into India if we were going to have an impact. So we started off 8 years back, and it was very difficult to start off with. It was just me and Varun in his father's office actually, and a lot of investors that we went to meet were like I said, they were all like, this is not going to work. I don't know why you're doing this. You're spending too much time on this. Indians are not generous. Secondly, I don't know who will go online and donate. Crowdfunding is not popular in India. But 8 years later, we've now raised over $120 million for various individual campaigns for various NGOs. And it takes me back to our starting premise, which is people.
800 odd crores. That's 800 odd crores.
Yeah.
So that's almost 100 crore run rate every year. Initially, it may be lower, but just to average that out, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of impact.
Yeah, and I mean, every day we see people who are complete strangers coming together to help people that they don't know, just from the goodness of their heart. So, we live in a world where we are always bombarded with bad stories. It starts making you believe that the world is a really bad place. But fortunately at Ketto, every day we are bombarded with good stories. Not good in terms of the people that we are helping, but good in terms of the fact that there's just random strangers, people that want to come together. I mean, just now with the COVID campaign that we've been running, a friend of mine's daughter is 9 years old, and she's been watching the news, and she said, Dad, I don't want to just stand by and watch. I want to help the migrants. So she started a campaign and she's raised 10 lakh rupees. So somebody who's as young as 9 years old is like, look, I don't want to sit around and watch. I want to make a difference. That for me is incredibly powerful. It shows you, how young people in this country really want to make a difference. And our aim at Ketto is really to constantly provide them with the avenue and make it as easy and transparent as possible, for them to be engaged.
Fantastic. And tell us, Kunal, why did you call it Ketto?
Well, Ketto is an abbreviation for Key to Tomorrow, because our belief was crowdfunding is the key to tomorrow, because it's really actually the democratization of capital. Whether you're looking for money for a creative.
And here I say democratization of philanthropy also. It provides an opportunity for everyone to do good karma, so to say.
Right, absolutely. That's such an important point. So yeah, democratization of philanthropy and capital. I mean, earlier if I wanted capital, I would not be able to reach out to anybody. Only a certain set of people could reach out to a certain set of people. Now, if I have a project which I want funded, I can reach out to the whole country or the whole world actually. Now, I mean, 35-40% of our donations come from donors outside India. So I can actually reach out to the whole world for a project that I have. So really it's the democratization of capital. And like you said, a really valid point is democratization of philanthropy, because earlier only a few people could give. Now, if I have 100 rupees, I can, get onto the internet, get onto Ketto and make a difference.
Kunal, I want to ask you, you wore multiple hats. You've been active for almost 2 decades.
Right.
And you've done a lot of things. Of course, primarily you're a performer, you're an actor, now you're an entrepreneur, you're a father, you're a husband. You've done lots of roles. And
Father, I'm not yet.
Huh?
Father, I'm not as yet.
Okay.
I'll get there.
Okay.
We get
Maybe I didn't do my research well. And it is with all jokes, no reference to any past or secret information that I have. But I'm sure you'd be father soon. So whatever has to happen, happens then. I said, you were a multifaceted personality. That's the point I'm trying to make. And life is not about either or. That, you do this and you don't do this. Tell us, what do you enjoy about being an entrepreneur? And what do you enjoy about being a performer?
I was just talking to somebody the other day and I was telling them that actually being an entrepreneur and being an actor, even though they seem like they are poles apart, are actually very similar.
And so what are the similarities?
So both acting and being an entrepreneur require creativity. I mean, as an actor, of course, you have to be creative. But as an entrepreneur, to disrupt something that has existed for years, you have to be creative, otherwise you can't disrupt something. So something that's existed for 4, 5, 6 decades and you come and disrupt that. You can't do that unless you're creative. Secondly is both as an actor and an entrepreneur, you have to listen to the audience. I might make a film which I think is great, but the audience might watch it on Friday and say, we don't like this at all. What were you thinking? Even as an entrepreneur, you have to constantly take feedback from the audience. You might think you have a great product, but the audience might not get engaged with it. So you have to take feedback and make those changes. Thirdly, I think what is really important for both is self-belief. I think as an actor,
Beautiful.
To be in a studio in front of 100 people and put yourself out there emotionally. It's a very sort of lonely job as an actor because you're preparing alone, you're acting alone. The only feedback you're getting is from your director. So you need a lot of self-belief to put yourself out there. Similarly, as an entrepreneur, I mean, when we started off, like I said, everybody said this is not going to work. The only thing that kept us going was the belief in our idea. We believed that this is going to work. And so self-belief, I think, is a really, really important thing for both of them. And listening to the audience and self-belief, I think those are things that are common between being an actor and an entrepreneur.
Okay, beautifully put. Both are creative. You have to be creative in the way you approach it. Second, you have to look at your audience. As a performer, clearly the audience has to accept it. As an entrepreneur, your stakeholders, your audience matters. Who is this product for? Why will they use this product? And third, which is the most beautiful thing you said, is self-belief. I think to achieve anything, that's the starting point, and you got to have that all through. So beautifully articulated. And coming back to you, General Mehta, if we had to rate Indian foundations versus global foundations, across the world, the concept of having a foundation, of being philanthropic, of being a social impact venture has existed for many years. Formally in India, it has existed 3 decades. Tell us, what can Indian foundations learn from global foundations? And what do you think global foundations can learn from the quality of work that Indian foundations do?
I think first let me correct one perspective. Though we are an Indian foundation, but it's run by a NRI, and we are funded by an NRI. There is a single donor for us, and we have a branch in US also. So we have the experience of both the worlds. We interact with a lot of international NGOs like America India Foundation, AmeriCare, and some odd 400 NGOs we have funded in India. So there is a lot to learn, and there has to be a cross-pollination between the outer world and India, or the Europe, America, India. Here, like Kunal said, that people want to donate, but they don't know whom to donate, whether the guy is honest or not honest. So whether this NGO is really delivering or not delivering, that kind of
clean bona fide, clean intent.
Clean and
that's important.
So that's what, whereas, in the world which is established, which has been doing philanthropy for a very long time, these kind of things are not, very prevalent over there. I'm not counting out that things don't happen there, but on a very, very minuscule scale. For example, when our promoters, they started working in India, I'm giving a very small anecdote. The legal guy, he was drafting the MOUs, which were to be signed between the NGOs and us. So he had put certain clauses in that. And the comment was, do you think the Indian NGOs are thieves? Why are you putting all those clauses? Please take them away. And good enough, initially 5 years, we faced a lot of problems, and those clauses were not there. And then we had to reintroduce that. That's one essential difference. We have a lot of NGOs, lakhs, so I believe there are 2.5 million NGOs in the country. Some, are just on paper. Most of them, I believe, there are a large number of them on paper. And those practices are not there. Whereas there are very good NGOs in India also. I can tell you about my foundation. You can rate it one of the finest organizations in the country. And our motto is Equitable Society. We like to, if it is not sounding very pompous, I would say that we aim to transform lives, be it a child who is born with hearing impairment, needing a cochlear implant, be it a child having congenital disease, and from very poor background, we have been supporting. These are very big programs we are running in the country, be it the national program which we are doing with the governments for setting up homes for the people who are suffering from mental health issues and staying in the mental institutions. And this program is nationwide. We had done a study along with the government, central government, and there are a couple of other programs which we are running for corneal blindness, integrated village development program, and it is changing lives. And there are people in India also who are doing very genuine work. So, and like Kato, he's given the example that there are people who can donate 100 rupees and they are making a difference. People are there who can donate, who really care for people, and there are other type of people also. So this is the essential difference which I find, and there is a lot to learn from each other. We can teach them our values. There are people with very great values in India. After all, we have been I would say, the fountainhead of culture and values, and we can teach them that. We know that how we take care of our elder people, and which is not existing in the it is not so in the outer world. We take care of our near and dear ones when they grow old. Those are the things we can talk about. And the COVID, there are thousands and thousands of examples where individuals came forward and looked after these people, who were walking back to their homes, and they came out, they cooked food, they gave them water, and without any, they spending money on their own. So that's the culture, that's the strong culture India holds. We can teach that to the world.
Thank you so much. Kunal, I want to ask you a question. We take, for everything, if you want to be an athlete, you have to train. You want to be a sports person, you want to be a pilot, you have to fly. And like when you entered acting, you entered the performance arts, you went to a academy. You went to, if I'm not wrong, I hope I'm not, to the Barry John Academy, right? Right. And then you worked with Nasiruddin Shah. So you trained, you took training. However, entrepreneurship, you haven't taken any training. So, yes, there are lots of questions and comments we'll take in the end. But tell us what have you learned? I mean, some things are ingrained. They're part of the personality, self-belief, the fact that you got into an uncharted territory as an actor and made it, there's a certain confidence. It's the quality of intent, the purity of the intent, all that. I believe in the universe coming together to make things happen. I'm a strong believer in that. So I know all that is true, but tell me, you did not prepare to be an entrepreneur. You didn't go to Harvard or in IIM Ahmedabad and said, oh, let me do a course on being an entrepreneur. So why not? Why did you train for being an entrepreneur? The point I'm trying to make is, do we need to be training for being an entrepreneur? Do we need to be studying? Or there is a certain set of skills you need which replace getting trained?
Well, I mean, if you believe somebody like Elon Musk, then education actually comes in the way of being an entrepreneur.
Right.
He's like, you should go to college and school, for fun, for experiences, but not.
He tweeted something for fun. He was penalized. He tweeted.
Oh, was he?
Yes, and he was smoking weed in a board meeting. I mean, that's Elon Musk.
Right. So, I mean, it's not. That's a very difficult question, because a lot of the entrepreneurs that you see around in our country are people that are not necessarily trained in business. They had a great idea, like we've been talking about: intent, self-belief, confidence. They went with it, and then people joined them and believed in the idea. So I don't know if it's essential to be trained to be an entrepreneur. What really helped me is I came from a business family. My dad was into construction. So I worked with him for a couple of years. I also worked in the stock market for a year. So it's not like I was I didn't have any sort of experience when it came to business. I had worked with him for 2.5 years. I understood how a business works. I was actually always interested in setting up a business as well, even when I was an actor. The only thing that I really wanted to do was to set up a business for good. I think that was something that was very strongly sort of ingrained in my head. I don't know where it came from. I grew up in a house with a very large family. Besides my immediate family, we had like 14 uncle aunts, 35 cousins. We all always lived like a community. And the idea of community was ingrained very early. The idea of giving within the community was something I think that came to me very early in life, not consciously, but just growing up in that atmosphere. So I think I wanted to definitely do something related to starting a business. But like I said, it was very important that that business was in the sphere of social impact. And I think with Ketto, both of them happened together.